First of all, I want to say thank you so much for taking out time to join this call. This is our first webinar in this series, and we'll be talking about building the skills to stay relevant in the age of data and AI. I know that everyone has heard this word somehow, somewhere, someday, right? Data, AI. And yeah, we just thought to put this webinar together to help us demystify some of these concepts and gives a lot of us a soft landing. Now, just to do some kind of background check, this is not a technical webinar. This is not a technical series. And what that means is we're not here to teach you about machine learning or very advanced AI concepts. This isn't an advanced session. This is for everyday people, everyday working professionals, students, business owners who just want to get ahead in this age of data and AI, right? Please, I'm just sounding that again, just so that nobody sends me an email and they're like, Peter, we're expecting you to bring out lines of code and all of that. That is not what this is for, okay? Right, this is a quote that I love so much, right? I can't change the direction of the wind. We know we can't do that, but what we can do is you can always adjust your sails, right? So that you can reach your destination. A very powerful quote by Jimmy Dean. And I'll just get started today by asking this very simple question. Can we remember what happened in March 2020? Where were we when everything got shut down? I really want to hear from us in the chats. Where were you in March 2020 when the whole world got shut down? Please let me know in the chat section where you were. I remember that day very vividly. I think I was at work, actually. I was at work that day when we heard the announcement. So you see that we were in like different locations at this date when everything got shut down. Yeah. Just a little introduction about myself. So I work in marketing, analytics, and digital strategy. I'm very passionate about driving business growth, digital transformation, and social impact. But most of all, I am an educator. You always see me teaching or sharing personal experiences and knowledge. And this passion has given me the privilege to train on a couple of platforms. So you have Udacity's digital marketing nano degree, where I served as a mentor. You have Google's digital skills for Africa program, where I served as a trainer. You also have Meta. It used to be Facebook before, but now it's Meta. So you have Meta's Boosts with Facebook program. So across my professional and personal journey, I have had the privilege of sharing information, sharing knowledge, and training across board. I also serve as the curator of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers Lagos Hub. So that's it about me in a page. Now let's go straight into what we want to look at today, right? So today we're going to actually uncover a couple of things. And the goal of this session is that at the end of today, you should be able to get some form of clarity on where you stand, whether as a student, as a career professional, as an entrepreneur, or as a business owner. Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at patterns. So we'll go into history and look at what lessons, what are those trends across humanity's existence, right? What are those trends across history, and what can we learn from those disruptions? Yeah. Some of the other things that we're going to do is to look at the present, right? So we look at the past, then we come into the present to understand what exactly is happening now and why that matters to you. So whether you're a student, whether you're a working class person, whether you're a business owner, yeah? And then after that, we'll look at the proof, right? We'll look at numbers, right? What are the numbers saying as far as this thing called data and AI is concerned? And when we're done with that, we will now look at some of the skills and your roadmap going forward. All right, now I want to know, how many of us have seen this thing before? Somewhere, somehow. AI is coming to take your job. How many of us have seen this? If you've seen it, just go in the comment section and say, Yes, I just need to see yes, 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 yes. Now let's look at this. So what you have at the headline, that was at 1928. That's a publication on Sunday, February 26, 1928. So you see that where it's 2025, this is like almost 100 years ago, right? When we didn't even have a lot of all of these technologies. But this has been a conversation for the longest, right? This has been a conversation for the longest. From 1928, 1940, 1956, all the way to 2025. It's about the machines. Robots are coming to take our jobs. Robots are coming, the machines are coming. So is this really, it actually begs the question, are we really looking at the rise of the machines truly, right? So I started by showing us what we are seeing in today's world, right? AI is coming to take our jobs. Everybody said, I've seen this some way, somehow. A friend, a mother, a colleague has said this. And then I take us back to history. 1928, March of the Machines. 1940, those machines replaced men. 1956, automation in Britain stirs unrest. So you see that there is really nothing new. What you're hearing now, machines will take my job, robots will take my job, it's nothing new, right? So I just really need you to take a breather and calm down. We are not the first humans in history to be threatened by machines. It's been happening for over 100 years, yeah? So I thought it was very important to mention that, just to give you a background. So don't feel like you are being left behind. Don't feel like, it's difficult, right? This thing has been happening. So we're going to look at the patterns, lessons from history, all right? And then we'll just look at what the Industrial Revolution used to look like, right? So before now, when we began to invent things, people began to discover about science, about engineering, right? About the steam engine and all of those technologies, right? We used to have a lot of people working in the factories. And then the Industrial Revolutionary era comes in. People discover technology, discover machines, and then you find out that because these machines are very efficient and very effective, right? A lot of the people that used to work in those factories began to slowly get replaced by machines. And you can see the depiction just right there before us, right? And this timeline was from the year 1760 to 1840, right? Characterized by the invention of the steam engine, so many inventions during that period. And gradually people who used to work at the factories, work on the lines, were gradually effaced and replaced by machines. So we got into digital revolution. And what happens? Invention of the World Wide Web. Digital cameras come out, right? Smart mobile phones come out. And then you have e-commerce. And then when that happens, technology, social media begins to bloom, begins to flourish. But then that digital revolution also comes with lessons, right? And I'll show us very soon. So one of those lessons is Kodak. Kodak of that era was maybe just like Nvidia, right? Or Tesla. I know all of us, I believe all of us know Tesla. So it was like Tesla of today. And then an engineer is just working on a pet project by the side, and he invents the first digital camera. Now he goes to his bosses and says, hey guys, or hey boss, I have this great idea. I've just been able to invent something. Can you help me to maybe bootstrap and put it into the mainstream? But now the bosses at Kodak say, no, we don't want to do that, right? We just keep your technology, keep your ideas one side, because we're very used to the normal way. We're very used to the norm. This is how we used to do it. This is how it has always been done as far as photography is concerned, right? We only use films. We don't use digital whatever. So this digital thing that you're calling, please solve it. That's what happens to that engineer at Kodak. The engineer leaves Kodak eventually, and then he begins to push on this big idea that he has stumbled on. Mind you, at that time, Kodak is controlling almost 90% of the film market at that time. So they are like, this digital thing that you're talking about, just let it go. We don't need it. Guess what happens? 2000s come, the year 2000s, and change. Digital cameras begin to explode exponentially. And in less than 12 years, Kodak files for bankruptcy. Now you can see to the right here, this is photos taken each year. And you can see how that from the year 1826, photos was increasing. So the very red line shows all the photos that are taken from the year 1826 to 2011. The yellow or the orange one shows you analog photos. So when you talk about analog photos, you are looking at those photos like that Kodak was doing, that you have to put a film, you have to, mind you, they were like 7 films. You have to put a film. Someone has their hands raised. Chioma, is there a challenge? Or we're just playing with the interface? All right. So you can see that there is an increase. So what I want to call out from this graph is that the red one shows that all photos that are being taken. And you can see that the photos never stop growing. It was not like people stopped taking photos, and that's what made Kodak bankrupt, right? The photos kept growing up, upward trend. But the analog photos, you can see that it kept growing. At a particular time, it tipped down. And what happened at this tip, what made it to immediately trend down, was the invention of digital cameras. So that same engineer that went to Kodak and said, "Hi guys, I have this idea of a digital camera." And they said, no. This thing you're talking about, we're very averse to change. All of this new normal talk you're talking is just, we're not interested in it, right? And guess what? Just barely in the 2000s, you can see the fall of Kodak, right? This represented by that steep decline, while the number of photos kept increasing. So it was never a problem of people stop taking photos. It was more of how they took photos changed. Yeah. All right. Let's see another example. Blockbuster and Netflix. Perhaps some of us here know Blockbuster. Perhaps some of us here don't, but I want to believe that everybody here knows Netflix. If you don't know Netflix, right, just put in the chat, no. If you've never heard of Netflix before, go in the chat and say no. Let me see the people who are not technology savvy, right? But I do know that everyone here knows about Netflix. Now, this story is very interesting as well, right? So this is what happens. In the year 1985, right, Blockbuster is founded by David Crook. Now, in the year 1997, Netflix is founded by Reed Hastings. And at that point, they introduced DVD subscription services. In the 2000s, Netflix walks up to Blockbuster and says, "Hi guys, we want to come into some kind of partnership with you. Can you buy us for $5 million? Blockbuster declines Netflix's offer. And then in 2004, Blockbuster reaches its peak at that market value. But guess what? At that point, Netflix now launches their streaming and their video on demand services. When the Blockbuster CEO sees the streaming idea, right? The pay as you stream idea that Netflix brings in. Just like the Kodak story, they're like, guys, what are you guys doing? You guys are just wasting your time. Nobody is going to pay for online TV. Everyone will always go to a physical store to buy DVDs, right? Netflix continues. They expand internationally in 2010, while Blockbuster begins to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. In 2013, Netflix starts to produce Netflix originals. Blockbuster closes its last store. 2018, 2022, 2025, we all know the story. Some of us here probably have never even heard about Blockbuster in our life. But yeah, they used to exist. They used to be the main thing. They used to be the big thing, right? But they were stuck in a particular way of thinking. They were stuck in a particular frame of mind, right? Nobody will ever do this. Please, let's focus on what we are currently doing. Let's focus on the thing that we know, the status quo. There is nothing like the new normal. And then what happens? The result is that gradually, but surely, Netflix completely overtakes Blockbuster as a company. Now, there are lessons here, right? There are very deep lessons here. And you can ask, what exactly did change? One, you realize that customers began to seek for something different, a new experience. It's normal, it's human nature. It's just like the Kodak story, right? People used to use films before. All of a sudden, customers are now like, this film is too old school. This digital camera is a trend. Let's jump on it. Right? Same thing with Blockbuster and Netflix. Customers evolved. Customers moved on, but they were so late. They were so late to realize this change and to jump on it. Please stay with me. We are going somewhere. Now, in the course of history, there are numerous examples. Like while I was preparing for this session, I just kept seeing so many examples of businesses, companies, right? Telcos, large organizations that if you were there during that era, you will never believe that these companies would fold up, right? But the examples are out there. You can check online. If anybody thinks of any example, feel free to drop it in the chats, right? But I have another very brilliant example here. iPhones, BlackBerry, right? Steve Jobs comes and says, guys, the era for buttons, having buttons on the screen has totally gone. We are now in the era of no buttons on the screen. BlackBerry says, nah. You're joking. Like, this thing you're saying, you're joking, right? We all know the story. We used to have BlackBerry Messenger. BlackBerry Messenger is now no more. Like, if anyone here if anyone even uses a BlackBerry in 2025, everyone around you just look at you like, what's up? What's going on with you, right? So these examples, they are spread across timelines, right? But these are just the three that I wanted to pick and talk about tonight. And when you consider all of these things that I have said, all of these things that I have talked about, someone said BlackBerry and is laughing. Yeah, actually, I mean, it is what it is, right? It's where you see that's what happens when either people or businesses refuse to evolve, right? So there is a universal pattern that I discovered here. And step one is that a new innovation or a disruption arrives, right? So whether it's in technology, whether it's a method, whether it's a new tool, whether it's a new way of learning, but something new arrives for a generation. The second step in this pattern is that the leaders, right, the leading companies, the big boys in the industry, they see this new disruption, this new innovation, and they are aware of it. They are actually aware of it. In fact, they are informed. They are pretty informed. Just like the Kodak story, right? The leaders see the innovation and they're informed about it. But what do they do? Step 3, they immediately dismiss it, right? What is this AI thing? You are always talking about data. What is this data thing? I beg, like, forget about this thing. This thing is nothing. You immediately dismiss it. So disruption arrives. AI. People are talking about AI, talking about data science, data analytics, etc. The leaders see it, but the leaders immediately dismiss it. Why? Because they want to protect the known. They would rather protect the known than go for the unknown, right? You would rather protect your current business idea than go for a new one. Protect your comfort over change. And then as you begin to dismiss it, the beauty of technology is that technology will never wait. Technology never waits, right? So what happens is the markets, the consumers, the people begin to shift. Whether you dismiss it or you don't dismiss it, people will begin to shift, right? So consumers, workers, excuse me. Yeah. So the consumers, the workers, people will shift, right? And then step 5, the moment leaders begin to see that people are moving, people are shifting. This person is learning data, is learning AI, learning how to use AI to improve their work. Then as you now begin to panic, you begin to try to join the train. But at that point, the momentum is already gone. The train has left, right? And the moment the train leaves, out of all of these patterns, there is a breakout. So somebody breaks out. The people who are able to identify disruption, see that disruption, not dismiss that disruption, shift with the changing times and seasons, and immediately adapt, whether it's their business model, whether it's their career, whether it's their study. Those people erupt out of the universal pattern, right? So this is usually what happens. 5 steps, and then you have someone erupts at every point with new escape velocity. Now, we looked at the past, we looked at the patterns. Let's look at the present. Now, the most closest wake-up call that we have for our generation was COVID. I always say to my friends that COVID-19, I always say to my friends that COVID-19 was the closest wake-up call that we had. And this is the reason why I say that COVID was the closest wake-up call. So March 11, we see this headline. Every news station is carrying this headline. COVID-19 declared a pandemic. This was March 11, 2020. The World Health Organization immediately declares COVID-19 as a pandemic. From 13th of March to the 16th of March, schools are closing, offices are shutting, and the lockdown kicks off in earnest. And overnight, literally from one day to another day, we begin to hear about things like remote work, Zoom, Google Meet, etc. Mind you, these tools and technologies were already in existence before COVID. They were already in existence before COVID. Good example of a company that does that is Zoom. They moved from 10 million to 300 million daily users in 3 months. And then guess what happens to businesses that are not online? Businesses that say, no, me, I don't sell. I don't market on social media. I'm not internet savvy. I'm not digitally savvy. Those businesses immediately fail. It's not like they closed down. Over 70% of businesses that were not online during COVID, they did not come back after COVID because they couldn't survive. How do you want to sell? How do you want to reach out to your customers? How do you want to market your products? Right? Simply because they were not able to identify those tides of change and flow with those tides. Now, I give you another example of two professionals working for one company at the time that COVID-19 happened, right? Left-hand side, you have professional A. Fantastic resume, 10 years experience working in a traditional environment. Never worked remotely before. Doesn't know how to use a lot of technologies. Is not digitally savvy. In fact, during office hours, when people are training and teaching about online skills and all of that, they're like, no, I'm not, Peter, I'm not a tech savvy person. And then they always value, always at the office, gisting, my guy, my paddy, And then you have the second professional B at the right hand. This person already knows how to use all of these tools, these platforms, Google Meets, Excel, Power BI, right? ChatGPT. We have a lot of people on this call that would say, yeah, I don't use ChatGPT. I don't even like to use ChatGPT to write. I am a writer. I was born to be a writer. Yeah? Absolutely no problem. I don't have any problem with you. I'm also not pointing fingers. I'm just showing you from history, the trends and the realities of these things, right? Especially when new technologies come up, right? So professional B already knows how to use these platforms. They're comfortable with remote setups. They're comfortable working remotely. They've had an experience using Google Meet, using Zoom, using all of these platforms. And yeah, they are more focused on the outcomes, the results, the outputs than just FaceTime, right? Gisting with colleagues, with friends, with acquaintances, right? They are more focused on results, efficiency, outputs, and outcome over presence. These are two professionals in the same company. Now, March 2020 hits. Remember, it's one company, it's one thing that is happening, but two different people. Person A, all of a sudden, they bring this new platform in the office called Zoom. And the person is lost, doesn't know what to do. The company immediately introduces platforms called Slack, Teams, Google Docs. They say, oh, this is the company wiki, let's all go there and learn how to use these platforms. This person is confused, cannot manage work remotely. If he doesn't see somebody to follow up with him, he's almost lost. And then breaks down when coming, is not visible to management. Of course, you'd expect that productivity drops. And what happens next is you become anxiety. Robots have come to take away my job. Right? And then to the right, the professional B. When the tools come, seamless, A1. He's just scoring, gets promoted during the pandemic, begins to even mentor colleagues on how they can work remotely, opens up a new chapter and the new career opportunities for themselves. Now, this is two professionals, one company, and COVID happens. The same instance, the same place, the same time, but different results. Now, this was COVID we're talking about right now. Now, can somebody just tell me in the chat? I know that I've already put in some answers here, but beyond what I have on the screen, can somebody just share in the chat what was the differentiating factor between professional A and professional B? Quickly in the chat. Anybody? Anyone at all? I would like to hear from us. What was the differentiating factor between person A and person B? So we have that one. It's really not about intelligence, right? I have some points here, but if you have other ones, just put them in the chat section. But it's really not that this other person was more intelligent. It wasn't about luck. It wasn't that this person was lucky, right? He was over prepared. Remember, I gave you two people, the same scenario, the same instance, same company, COVID happens. It had nothing to do with intelligence. It had nothing to do with luck. It had absolutely nothing to do with money. It was I didn't show any instance where, oh, this person had more money than the other person. Has nothing to do with the age of the person. Had nothing to do with the industry. These people were working in the same company. And also it had nothing to do with geographical location. It was just one word, and that word is preparation. Yeah, I can see Henry says professional A was not ready to adapt, while professional B took adaptation seriously. Very correct. Wanda says option B was prepared, adaptable, and even ready to transfer knowledge, right? And that's where my call out is that someone was prepared and the other person was not prepared, right? And that's the beauty about change. That's why I have it here, that preparation does not always mean that you predict the future. I don't know that there is anybody on this call that knows how to predict the future. I don't know how to predict the future. I'll be very sincere with you. If you come and you ask me, Peter, in the next 50 years, what is going to happen? I would say what would happen is what has always been happening. It will not change. There is that very popular adage that says, nothing new. There is really nothing new under the sun. I showed us in the beginning of the presentation how that in 2025, we're talking about AI and data and robots taking our jobs, and how that it was the same message that was happening over 100 years ago. 1928, we're saying the rise of the machines. So if you ask me, Peter, predict the next 50 years, what would happen in the next 50 years? I would say to you that what would happen is what has always happened. It's not going to change. In the next 100 years, next 200 years, machines will always want to take the jobs of humans, even though it's becoming a lot more serious. But yeah, that's the point here, right? And it's just to sound this note to us all that preparation doesn't always mean predicting the future, right? It means being ready, being equipped. Somebody said adaptable. I really like that comment, right? Stanley says one was not prepared for the future and didn't think ahead. Meanwhile, the other person did, right? So we're all saying the same thing, right? One person was prepared, one person was ready, one person was equipped, right? Whether it's in the skills that they need to deliver the future that they want, whether it's in their capacity to, understand the changing times of, or the changing tides of time. But the message here is that preparation does not mean that you are able to predict the future. It just simply means that you're ready for change. You are ready for whatever comes, right? Change does not meet you while you are napping, but rather you are always waiting and anticipating change. Now, there is usually a timeline. I have sat down and I have studied this thing. And in my preparing this slide for tonight's meeting, I realized that there is a timeline for every disruption. When you look at AI, when you look at innovations, when you look at technology, there is usually a timeline, right? And the first timeline is what is called the early phase. That's the first timeline, the early phase. And in this early phase, like we have learned, new things appear. You hear of new things. You hear of AI. You hear of data. You hear of new things, right? But a lot of people ignore these things. Then you go to what is called the growth phase. And for the growth phase, you have that a lot of early adopters begin to benefit from these new things that are coming up, right? People still want it. People hear about AI, hear about data, but other people, they are called early adopters. They begin to learn. They begin to go on ChatGPT. They try to use it. They try to look at how it works. They try to take advantage of these things. And then from that growth phase, go to what is called the tipping point. Excuse me. Tipping point is where suddenly everything, like that thing that has been at the early phase, now becomes very important. It becomes very essential, right? It suddenly becomes essential. Everybody is now trying, scrambling. I want to learn. It's now that I want to learn. I want to learn AI. I want to. But guess what has happened? We've moved on. We've all moved on. That's the tipping point, right? This thing suddenly becomes important. It becomes essential, and everyone is now trying to scramble. Then you have what is now called the new normal, proper. And this is where it is non-negotiable. You don't have a choice. You have to learn how to use it. You have to learn how to use the platform. You have to learn how to use ChatGPT and Gemini and all of these platforms, all of these large language models. So I have realized in my study of time, seasons, and the changing tides, you always have, when there is a new innovation, when there is a new disruption, when there is a new disruption and a new innovation, you always have that. One, there is the early phase, and which is that, well, new things are beginning to happen and people ignore it. You have the second phase, the growth phase. And in that phase, early adopters, the people who jump on the new innovation early enough, they benefit from it. Then you have the tipping point, and then you have the new normal. Now, the question is, where are we in this era? In this era of data, in this era of AI, in this era of tech, where are we? We're literally between phase 2 and phase 3. And friends, before this thing becomes the new normal, my call to action to everyone is that you have the opportunity to learn. You are in the learning window. You are at that point in the learning window where you can literally take advantage of the courses, take advantage of the knowledge, take advantage of the information that is out there to learn so that you can give yourself the edge. I usually say to my friends that, constant learning is always what gives you the edge, right? You have the opportunity to be between those who are initially now hearing about these technologies and those who are suddenly scrambling, right? So we're in between phase 2 and phase 3. Now we look at the proof, look at data, look at AI, right? And what is currently happening. The truth is that right now, data and AI, it's not a hype, it's the reality. It's the new barest minimum. For those of us who maybe work remotely and we have the opportunity to work with companies, organizations across the world, this is what the new normal is. Data and AI is not a hype. It's the new baseline, right? And we can see that in the explosion, the exponential explosion of AI, right? And the numbers really usually don't lie. I did used to have a boss some 3, 4, 5 years ago who would always say, Peter, in God we trust, everyone else bring data, bring numbers, right? So the numbers do not lie, right? ChatGPT was able to get over 100 million users in 2 months. 2 months, it went from 0 to 100 million. And just to put into context, Instagram took over 3 years for them to have that number. TikTok took 9 months. TikTok that we're all crazy about took 9 months to have 100 million users. Spotify took 11 years. Netflix took 10 years. But ChatGPT was able to hit 100 million users in barely 2 months of its launch. That's the new reality. AI is exploding exponentially. And I don't want you to get caught up in that mix of trying to get used to all of the AI models. I don't teach that. I don't want you to get overworked, to get overwhelmed. Oh, everything that is, I need to learn everything. No. Just calm down and take it bit by bit, right? But the fact is that there is an exponential adoption of AI. Now, when you also look at the global AI adoption, you realize that companies are now beginning to okay the use of AI. Right? Even in my office, I encourage, for those of us who know me, I encourage the use of AI strongly. Right? You can see that AI is expected to reach almost 80% adoption by next year. The AI market size is projected to hit over 1.8 trillion. And when you look at the workplace, employees are already using AI tools, whether you like it or not, right? People say AI has improved their productivity, and companies that are using AI report over 25% increase in efficiency. Excuse me. Right? When you also look at the job market, you see that people are now beginning to ask for data skills, right? Companies are beginning to ask, oh, do you know how to use data? Do you understand how to read data? Professionals with data skills now begin to earn a lot more than their counterparts, right? Entry roles are now even requiring that you learn at least basic data skills, basic Excel, how to build a pivot table, for instance, X lookups, V lookups, basic data and Excel skills, right? And that's really what we're about at what we do at SkillsVerse. At the beginning of this presentation, I said, we're really not focused on the complex AI technical things that are out there, right? You can leave the technical things for the bigger players. We are more focused on literacy, how to get you from that point where you know absolutely nothing about data, absolutely nothing about AI, to where you are very comfortable, you're very okay using data, using AI, right? The job market says it for themselves, right? Very interesting. Now, we also look at what is called the WEF report. So this is the World Economic Forum's report, right? And when you look at it, you see that the top 10 fastest growing skills by the year 2030, the top is AI and big data, followed by, of course, networks and cybersecurity, technological literacy, etc., etc. But the top of the top is AI and big data. And if you are like that person, if you are like, I showed a quadrant of the normal universal patterns where I said there's these people that follow this way, but then there are people who break off. So if you're like that person that is going to break off in the next 5 years, the World Economic Forum is already saying that by 2030, these are the top 10 skills that will be relevant, that will give you the opportunities, the leverage, the openings that you need, that you require. These are the opportunities, right? AI and big data, networks, technological literacy, etc., etc. And then you see the core skills there as at 2025, analytical thinking, right? Analysis, data analysis. You see resilience, you see leadership, creative thinking, etc., etc. Right? I just show us the big picture so that it's not as if it is Peter that is saying this, right? Peter, because yes, of course, now you are the data and AI guy, but why wouldn't you say it? So maybe if we bring in another neutral third party, you can see for yourself, right? For those of us that know the World Economic Forum, this is from the World Economic Forum. You can check it out at your leisure time. So I just took this out from one of their from their publication that they did earlier this year. And you can see it right there: AI and big data, networks, technological literacy, creative thinking, etc., as the top 10 fastest growing skills. And we look at how AI is disrupting industries. You can see AI is disrupting marketing, customer service, logistics, inventory management, healthcare. The list could go on and on. AI is going to innovate and disrupt medicine. AI is going to disrupt accounting. AI is going to disrupt a lot of these industries, a lot of them. right? And this is the disruption that we are talking about. Now, looking at everything that we have said, there are certain things that come to mind. One, someone can say that, oh, do I need to be a data analyst, a data scientist, an expert to be able to get started? And what I'm saying to you tonight is that no, you don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be a maths guru. You don't need to read computer science. I didn't read computer science in school. I started with mechanical engineering, right? I studied mechanical engineering. Then I went into marketing, digital marketing, right? You don't have to become a data scientist. You don't need any technical degree to get started. You don't need to go and invest years and years. I mean, if you want to advance, of course, you can invest those years. But remember, we're at the point where you are just getting started into all of these things, right? You don't need years of experience. You don't need expensive software. You also do not need to quit your current job. This is very important. You do not need to quit what you're currently doing to say, I attended this fantastic webinar and Peter kept talking about data, and AI, and I'm going to go and resign. Please, that's not wisdom. Please, you don't need to leave your current job to learn. What you do need is, you do need to understand, how can I use data to make decisions? How can I use AI to improve my effectiveness and efficiency? How can I organize and interpret my information better? How can I clearly communicate insights? How can I automate repetitive tasks? Right? These are things that you need. How can I structure myself? How can I structure my thoughts? Right? These are the things that you actually do need. And just talking about everything and what we do. So my name is Peter once again, and my passion, especially for young people. That's why I started this call saying, please, this is not a technical class. We're not teaching you coding. I'm specifically focused on people who are going from ground zero, who have never started, who have never interacted with data before. You open Excel and you see numbers and you are afraid. You just freeze, right? That's really what SkillsVerse is about. We are an ed tech company, and what we do is we are focused on training young people, young professionals with practical data and AI skills. It's going to be 6 weeks from November 24th. We're going to have 6 weeks of training all the way to January to see how we can just get ourselves onboarded and get ourselves to start this particular journey of learning. So just feel free to get in to SkillsVerse HQ. That's the website there, skillsversehq.com/edge. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you in class.